Discover a command by using the help system. Completed 100 XP 1 minute by using the built-in help system in PowerShell. You can find out more about a specific command. You use the get command to locate a command that you need. After you've located the command, you might want to know more about what the command does and various ways to call it. Discover commands by using the help system and get help. You can use the get help core command to learn more about a command. Typically, you invoke get help by specifying it by name and adding the name flag that contains the name of the command you want to learn about. Here's an example. Update help. New versions of PowerShell don't include the help system by default. The first time you run get help, you're asked to install the help files. You can also run the update help command to install the help files. Because a call to update help downloads many help files, the command can fetch only once per day by default. You can override this fetching behavior by using the force flag. You update the help files differently on Windows compared to Linux or Mac OS. The process differs because when you run the update help command, help files are fetched over the internet by matching your computer's culture. On Windows, a culture is already installed, but it's missing on Linux and Mac OS. So you need to specify a culture when you update help files on Linux and Mac OS. Here's an example command. This command specifies the UI culture flag. It gives it the value ENUS, which fetches US English help files. To update your help files on Mac OS or Linux, use a culture that corresponds to your machine's culture. Explore help sections. When you invoke get help on a command, a help page is returned. The page includes many sections. You'll likely see these common sections. Name provides the name of the command. Syntax shows ways to call the command by using a combination of flags, and sometimes, allowed parameters. Aliases lists any aliases for a command. An alias is a different name for a command, and it can be used to invoke the command. Remarks provides information about what commands to run to get more help for this command. Parameters provides details about the parameter. It lists its type, a longer description, and acceptable values, if applicable. Filter the help response. If you don't want to display the full help page, narrow the response by adding flags to your get help command. Here are some flags you can use. Full returns a detailed help page. It specifies information like parameters, inputs, and outputs that you don't get in the standard response. Detailed returns a response that looks like the standard response, but it includes a section for parameters. Examples returns only examples, if any exist. Online opens a web page for your command. Parameter requires a parameter name as an argument. It lists a specific parameter's properties. For example, you can use the following command to return only the examples section of the help page. Improve the reading experience. Running get help returns the entire help page. The page might not provide the best reading experience. You might have to scroll to find the section you want to read. A better approach is to use the help alias. The help alias pipes get help into a function that ensures that your output is readable line by line. It also makes the response readable page by paginating the output. You'll use the help alias in the next unit. After you find a command you want to use, you can learn more about it. For example, you can learn about the different ways to call it, what parameters you can use, and example use cases. Because this output is difficult to read, you decide to use an alternative that is less verbose. That is, you use the help alias. Because this output is difficult to read, you decide to use an alternative that is less verbose. That is, you use the help alias. Now, a reduced version of the help output is shown. It looks like the following text. You can move through the results vertically, row by row, by using the arrow keys. To view the results page by page, use the spacebar. This output contains a list of examples that use the command. Locate the part of the response that contains the text example 1. This portion of the text shows how you can use getFileHash with a file path by piping it to the command format list. This output contains a list of examples that use the command. Locate the part of the response that contains the text example 1. This portion of the text shows how you can use getFileHash with a file path by piping it to the command format list. Discover objects completed 100 XP 1 minute. When a command runs, it returns an object. When you invoke a command, the response you see has been formatted and might not necessarily represent all the available information for the response. To know more about what's being returned and how you can modify what is returned, you can use the command getMember. Discover objects by using getMember. The getMember command is meant to be piped on top of the command you run so that you can filter the output. A typical command line invocation of getMember might look like the following example. This command first produces an object result by calling getProcess. That result is passed as an input to getMember by using the pipe. In return, you get a table result that includes the name, member type, and definition columns. You also get the type of the returned object. Search by type. The first line of the response, running the getMember command, is the type of the returned object. When you know the type, you can search for other commands that operate on the same type. Explore these related commands to quickly build your knowledge in the domain you're working in. Let's say you invoked the PowerShell command that lists all members for a specific process. The first few rows of the result look something like this output. The first row indicates that the type is system.diagnostics.process. Use this type as a search argument to look for other commands that use this type. Here's an example command. The result is a list of commands that operate on this type. Little by little, you can learn more about PowerShell by using getMember and by learning to interpret its result. PowerShell is meant to be learned a little at a time. A great way to discover related converts is by using the return type to search for converts by type. Filter a getMember result by using select object. When you run getMember, the result is verbose. That is, many rows are returned. The object might have properties, like events and methods. To make the answer less verbose, you can filter on specific columns and also decide which columns to display. Keep in mind that the returned answer is already a subset of all the columns in the response. Take a look at a getMember response that includes many columns. By introducing the select object convert, you can choose which columns appear in the response. The command expects either a comma-separated list of column names or a wildcard character, such as an asterisk, which indicates all columns. When you use the select object command in the context of select object name, member type, you specify only the columns you want. In this case, the columns are name and member type. The command line would look like this. This filtering pattern returns an output that includes fewer columns. Here's an example of the result. You also can filter the response by rows. For example, you can use the member type method flag to specify that you're interested in the rows in which the member type is a method. You might want to show only specific rows, for example, if you want to locate and run a specific method. It's generally better to use dedicated converts than to run methods on an object. In some scenarios, you'll need to manage processes on a machine. If you need to stop some of the processes, you might want to track what processes are running, how many resources they are using, and their process IDs. Discover an object by using getMember. You know that the getProcessConvert lists information about processes. Now, you want to find what other converts work with processes and what a process consists of. In this scenario, you'll use the getMember convert. Run getProcess. The table-like response consists of all processes that are running on your machine. The exact response depends on what is running on your machine. Choose a process name from the column on the right, and then use it as an argument for your next command. Run getProcess again. This time, use the process name and pipe getMember. This command produces a long response that consists of all members, events, and methods. At this point, focus on the first line, which lists the following information. Now you know that the type is process. You can learn more about what other converts use this type. Next, use get command and add the type as a parameter. Congratulations! By knowing the name of the get process command, you've discovered related commands. You can continue to learn about these commands by using get help. One. Using the help system, what command or function helps you paginate the response? Using the help system, what command or function helps you paginate the response? Which statement will most efficiently find the return type from a command? Incorrect. Get help is the command you use to find out more about a command. However, adding the help function offers a better experience because it paginates the response, so you can traverse it row by row. Correct. By using help, you pipe the get help command into a function so that you can see the help page. You can see it row by row and line by line, if you want. Get type is not the command to use to find the return type from a command. The get member command lists the return type at the top of the response. In this module, you learned how to inspect a command that you intend to use. Looking at a command before you use it helps you call the command correctly and learn the different ways you can call the command. You also looked at inspecting what a command returns. PowerShell commands return objects. By calling getMember, you learn what type of object will be returned and the object's properties. With that information, you can look for related commands that operate on same object type. You'll learn how to use object type information in later modules that look at pipelines and combining multiple commands in a single command. In PowerShell, you run compiled commands, or commands. By connecting these commands, you can create powerful combined statements, or pipelines. You'll find such combined statements useful as you're looking to automate your workflows. As part of creating these pipelines, it's beneficial to understand how to format the output to your liking. For example, a carefully selected output format might allow you to quickly get an overview of a situation, or make it easier to fit the output into a report. When you learn to combine commands, you unlock much of the power that's built into PowerShell. Learning objectives. After you complete this module, you will be able to explore commands further and construct a sequence of them in a pipeline. Apply sound principles to your commands by using filtering and formatting. Selecting data completed 100 XP 4 minutes. Running a command can be powerful. You get data from your local machine or from across the network. To be even more effective, you need to learn how to get the data that you want. Most commands operate on objects, as input or as output, or both. Objects have properties and you may want to access a subset of those properties and present them in a report. You might also want to sort the data based on one or more properties. But how do you get there? Use getMember to inspect output. When you pass the results of a command to getMember, getMember returns information about an object, like the type of object being passed to getMember, the properties of the object that may be evaluated, the methods of the object that may be executed, Let's demonstrate this fact by running getMember on the command get process. Note how you're using the pipe and that by calling getMember, you are in fact creating a pipeline already. The first few lines of output from the preceding statement look like so. The output shows the type of object that the getProcess command returns, system.diagnostics.process. The rest of the response shows the name, type, and definition of the object's members. You can see that if you want to fit getProcess with another command in a pipeline, pairing it with getMember is a good first step. Select Object by default. When you run a command that is going to output to the screen, PowerShell automatically adds the command out default. When the output data is a collection of objects, PowerShell looks at the object type to determine if there's a registered view for that object type. If it finds one, it uses that view. The view generally doesn't contain all the properties of an object because it wouldn't display properly on screen, so only some of the most common properties are included in the view. You can override the default view by using Select Object and choosing your own list of properties. You can then send those properties to Format Table or Format List, to display the table however you like. Consider the result of running getProcess on the process ZSH. What you see is a view that represents what you most likely want to see from this command. However, this view doesn't show you a complete set of information. In order to see something different, you can explicitly specify which properties you want to see in the result. Getting the full response what you've seen so far is a limited response. To present the full response, you use a wildcard asterisk, like so. The asterisk character shows you every attribute and its value, which allows you to investigate the values you're interested in. The full response also uses presentation names for properties instead of the actual property names, and presentation names look good in a report. Despite these benefits, you may not want a full output of data, but you may not be content with the default response either. Selecting specific columns to limit the response and find a middle ground between the default response and the full response, you want to select some properties you're interested in and have that as parameter input to select object. But, and here's a problem, you need to use the real names for the columns. How do you find out the real names? Use getMember. A call to getMember gives you all the properties and their actual names. Finding the real property name. Let's quickly recap on the default response, with this subset. From the default response, the properties ID and process name are most likely called the same, but CPU s is a presentation name. Real property names tend to consist of only text characters and no spaces. To find out the real name for a specific property, you can use getMember. You now get a list of all members with names that start with AC. Among them is CPU, which is likely what you want. You now know how to use Select Object to ask for exactly what you need with the correct property names, like so. This sequence of commands gives you an output that differs from the default output but contains properties that you care about. Sorting. When you use sort object in a pipeline, PowerShell sorts the output data by using the default properties first. If no such properties exist, it then tries to compare the objects themselves. The sorting is either by ascending or descending order. By providing properties, you can choose to sort by specific columns, like so. In the preceding command, we're sorting by the column name in descending order. To sort by more than one column, separate the column names with a comma, like so. In addition to sorting by column name, you can also provide your own custom expression. In this example, we use a custom expression to sort by the column's name and CPU and control the sort order for each column. The preceding example demonstrates how powerful and flexible sort object can be. This subject is a bit advanced and out of scope for this module, but is revisited in more advanced modules. Discover the most used processes on your machine. To manage your machine, you sometimes need to discover what processes run on it and how much memory and CPU they consume. This information tells you what the machine spends its resources on. You can use this information to decide whether to introduce new processes on your machine, to leave the machine as it is, or to free resources by closing resource-intensive processes. The more you know about the processes that run on your machine, the better. To manage your machine, you sometimes need to discover what processes run on it and how much memory and CPU they consume. This information tells you what the machine spends its resources on. You can use this information to decide whether to introduce new processes on your machine, to leave the machine as it is, or to free resources by closing resource-intensive processes. The more you know about the processes that run on your machine, the better. To begin, run the command get process, and pipe in the commandlets where object, sort object, and select object. The exact output you see depends on your machine. But, you should see a result where the first three processes whose CPU value is greater than 2, GT2, are sorted in descending order. Your output should look similar to the following example. Use formatting and filtering completed 100 XP 1 minute. When you work with PowerShell, filtering and formatting are important concepts to understand, for a couple of reasons. First, you want to create a pipeline that produces the result you want. Second, you want to do so efficiently, both in terms of how you pull data over the network, and how you ensure that the result is something you can work with. Filtering left in a pipeline statement. Filtering left means filtering for the results you want as early as possible. You can think of the term left as early, because PowerShell statements run from left to right. The idea is to make the statement fast and efficient by ensuring that the dataset you operate on is as small as possible. This principle really comes into play when your commands are backed by larger data stores or you're bringing back results across the network. Consider the following statement. This statement first retrieves all of the processes on the machine. It ends up formatting the response so that only the name property is listed. This statement doesn't follow the filtering left principle, because it operates on all the processes, attempts to format the response, and then filters at the end. It's better to filter first and then format, as in the following statement. Often, a control that offers filtering is more efficient than using where_object. Here's a more efficient version of the preceding statement. Formatting right, formatting as the last thing you do, whereas filtering left means to filter something as early as possible in a statement. Formatting right means to format something as late as possible in the statement. Okay, but why do I need to format late? The answer is because format commands alter the structure of the object that your results are contained in so that your data is no longer found in the same properties. This alteration impacts your ability to retrieve the information you want by using pipe commands, select object, or by looping through the results with for each. The formatting destroys the object with which you're dealing. Take the following call for example. What these types are, isn't important for this lesson. What's important to realize is that when you use any type of formatting command, your data is different. And when it's different, it may no longer contain the columns you care about. Let's illustrate with an example. Let's use formatting first and then select object, to illustrate what might happen if you don't format last. The result now looks like so. It's empty, because format table transformed the object containing your results by placing data into other properties. Your data isn't gone, only your properties. The preceding PowerShell command makes an attempt to find the properties but is unable to. Formatting commands should be the last thing you use in your statement because they are meant for formatting things nicely for screen presentation. They aren't meant to be used as a way to filter or sort your data. Formatting commands. The most common commands to use to format your output are format table and format list. By default, most commands format output as a table. If you don't want your output to display properties in columns, use the format list command to reformat them as a list. In this unit, you use Azure Cloud Shell to format your PowerShell output. Azure Cloud Shell is a shell that you can access through the Azure portal. You don't have to install anything on your PC or laptop to use it. Compare formatting approaches. Different output formats make sense for different scenarios. For example, depending on the type of data that you want to display, a table might make more sense than a list. Some commands use a certain type of formatting by default. You can override the default formatting by using a formatting command. Type PWSH in a terminal window to start a PowerShell session. How would you find all members of a response starting with F? What will this command answer with get process sum process format table name, CPU select object name, CPU? Here use of format table before select object transforms the response to another type of object, so values for name and CPU are no longer found where they used to be. The format table command will transform the response so that name and CPU values still exist, but in other columns.